What's going on, everyone? For today's video, it's going to be a GameSir G7 Pro unboxing and review. I mentioned in my GameSir G7 SE review that if GameSir made a pro version of the SE, I would buy it. So here we are. The full title of the controller is the GameSir G7 Pro Tri-Mode. The peripheral device is compatible with Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, PC, and Android. The controller has Tri-Mode connection, drift-proof TMR sticks, trigger and grip vibration, Hall/clicky trigger stops, and is compatible with the GameSir Nexus app. It also includes a charging station, 2 swappable D-pads, USB dongle, and 1 month of Xbox Game Pass. The back of the box reads, high precision TMR sticks, linear output, ultra long lifespan, optical micro switch ABXY buttons, ultra long lifespan, ultra fast trigger response, 2 mappable bumpers, toggle between micro switch and Hall effect analog triggers with vibration, rubber coated anti-slip textured grips, 2 lockable back buttons, 3.5mm headphone jack, supports wireless usage, 3-part detachable faceplate for easy customization. At the time of shooting this video, the controller comes in 4 different colorways: Mech White, Shadow Ember, Wu Chang Fallen Feathers Edition, and the Zenless Zone Zero Edition. The Mech White and Shadow Ember retail at $79.99. The Wu Chang Fallen Feathers goes for $99.99. And finally, the Zenless Zone Zero Edition is priced at $130 US. From what I can tell, the Wu Chang and Zenless Zone Zero versions offer wireless connectivity with the Xbox consoles. The Mech White and Shadow Ember versions only support a wired connection on Xbox. And the reason why the Zenless Zone Zero costs a little bit more is because it includes more goodies: 8 interchangeable sticks, 4 silicone thumbstick covers, an additional faceplate, a carrying case, and a cool keychain. But other than that, the controllers have the same functionalities. The reason I went with the Mech White colorway is because I wanted it to match with my G7 SE. This time around, my box came with no damage, and for an $80 controller, I'm glad the packaging is quite sturdy. When you open the box, the controller, dock station, and USB receiver are on the top. Right under is a manual and the cable. D-pad accessories are below the charging station. You get the standard thank you note from GameSir, QR code for the GameSir Discord, how to contact them, a GameSir logo sticker, 1 month of Xbox Game Pass, and at last, the G7 Pro manual. The manual is lengthy and it includes multiple languages. You can also find the manual online on the GameSir website. Aesthetically, the wireless receiver seems pretty generic. I was expecting the GameSir logo to be 3D printed on it, but that wasn't the case. The dock station is light. It has the GameSir logo on the front and the colorway is a sparkling gray. The USB-C port is located on the back, and on the bottom is a housing you can open to store the USB dongle. When you insert the receiver, there's still enough space to store the plastic piece that secures the cable. The cable is a typical quality threaded USB-C to USB-A, very similar if not exactly the same as the GameSir G7 SEs. You get 2 swappable D-pads, a gray finish on both of them, and ultimately the controller itself. First impressions of the G7 Pro, the controller feels a lot heavier than the previous GameSir rollers that I've reviewed. That includes the Tegenera Lite and the G7 SE. The G7 Pro is sturdy and sightly. They include styrofoam rings to further protect the thumbsticks from the shipping process. The 3.5mm audio jack is located on the bottom and supports both wired and wireless connections. To the right of the jack is the microphone mute button, and to the left is the pairing button. The handles are a rubber laser engraved textured finish that feel exceedingly great. A retainer is included to make sure the cable is stable and secure. The back of the controller looks just as appealing as the front. It has a switch for the 2.4 GHz USB and Bluetooth connections. To remove the cable retainer, you simply push down like so and lift it. If you ever want to install it again, you place the retainer on the wide gaps and push up. The textured grips are an improvement from the G7 SEs. Reminds me of the textured grips from an Xbox Elite Series 2. The thumbsticks feel nice and loose, immensely similar to the Hall effect sticks. D-pad is of high quality and feels like a mouse click. The M button, share, select, start, Xbox Home, mute, and pairing button are all normal membrane buttons that feel solid. ABXY buttons have that attractive glossy finish. They are micro switch buttons that feel just as good as the D-pad. The left and right bumpers feel fine. They are membrane. Triggers feel great. You can switch between Hall effect analog or use the micro switch trigger stops. Never played with a controller that has micro switch triggers, and consequently I was thrilled. The mini bumpers L5 and R5 are micro switch bumpers that feel astounding. Back buttons are just as good as the G7 SEs and also include back button latches. The faceplate is removed in 3 parts as opposed to its predecessors. Here's the Master Chief holding the G7 Pro. that being said, let's move on to the first category, durability. I wanted to give this controller a fair shot, so this time around I bought the G7 Pro pretty early on. I've been using this controller for the past 3 months and I'm happy to report that everything still works like day one out of the box. The build quality is what is most impressive here. It's a very sturdy controller. Just to put this into perspective, I think the G7 Pro is going to last me longer than the G7 SE, and the G7 SE is still exceptional in terms of durability. To turn on the controller, connect it via wired or wireless and press and hold the Xbox home button for about half a second. There will be a solid white ring indicating the connection was successful. To turn it off, you press and hold the Xbox home button for 5 seconds. If the controller remains inactive for 10 minutes, it will enter standby mode, saving you some battery for the next time you grab the controller. Although, the roller will still consume energy in a standby state, but it is significantly less than when it's turned on. When using the G7 Pro wirelessly or with a Bluetooth connection to make sure that it's off and not consuming any energy, you can move the mode switch to the center. My intention with this controller is to use it on PC and my Xbox consoles, so the footage you are seeing in this video are of those two platforms. However, to restate, you can use this with Android via Bluetooth, or if you have a USB-C to USB-C cable, it will work this way as well. I'll make sure to leave the instructions on the screen on how to connect your G7 Pro to your Android device via Bluetooth. It's important to note that Bluetooth only works with Android and not with iOS devices. The Xbox indicator will flash red when the battery is below 15%. You can charge the controller with the charging station or with the cable connected to your PC. As long as it's not in use, it will charge the internal battery. A, B, X, Y are optical micro switch buttons. These buttons are considered the fastest and most responsive buttons in the industry because of how they register. Optical switch buttons use a beam of light to read the input and have an average response time of 0.25 milliseconds, sometimes even less. Now that's impressive, but how do they feel? The answer is pleasant. The sensation is similar to mechanical switches, but less clicky. I would describe it as somewhere in between membrane and mechanical. Not quite as quiet as membrane buttons, but not as loud as mechanical switches. The ABXY buttons were excellent for every game that I played. Just to name a few, I played some Expedition 33, Back 4 Blood, Forza Horizon, Halo CE, Battlefield 6, SpongeBob SquarePants, The Cosmic Shake, and a variety of Game Boy Advance games. Glyph swap is available, but not on the fly, meaning it's only available through the software and not by holding the M button to quickly swap. I'll continue talking about this on the GameSir software portion of the video. The G7 Pro has Hall effect analog triggers that can be toggled to micro switch trigger stops. The Hall effect analog triggers felt great, vastly similar to the G7 SE triggers. They use magnetic sensors to detect movement, and because of this, they are more durable. When switching to the micro switch trigger stops, the sensation is of a mouse click and is immensely satisfying to press. Regardless of which mode you have it on, you can use the GameSir Nexus software or the instructions in the manual to customize the triggers into hair triggers. Therefore, it comes down to preference. Do you like the longer press or the shorter clicky trigger press? Or maybe you're like me and switch back and forth between modes to experience games in different ways. In my G7 SE review, I criticized how the laser engraved textured grips on the bumpers were on the bottom rather than the top part. The G7 Pro fixed this issue. However, the bumpers are membrane, and even though they are easy to press and there is no stiffness to them like many other controllers, the left and right bumpers will most likely be what malfunctions first on this controller. Not to mention that they feel oddly the same as the G7 SE's bumpers, with the exception of the grip feeling being where your finger will most likely press. I don't want to sound like I hate the bumpers. They are a joy to press. It's just that I was looking for an upgrade from membrane to mechanical or even Hall effect. Oh well. Maybe next time. The mini bumpers are amazing. They are mechanical, and for that reason they make a satisfying clicky noise. Like almost any other button, they can be mapped using the GameSir software or the instructions in the manual. The placement of the mini bumpers remind me of the Razer Wolverine V2s. Quick and easy to press since they have no resistance, and for this reason you might find yourself accidentally pressing them. Depending on how you grip your controller, the mini bumpers can feel like they are in your way. I'm talking to people that play with claw grip and have never used a controller with mini bumpers. It just takes some time to getting used to. One of my favorite aspects about the G7 Pro is the D-pad. Since it's mechanical, it's also satisfying to hear and press. Going from a membrane D-pad to a mechanical one, you can definitely tell the difference. To test the D-pad, I played some classic Game Boy Advance games. Responsiveness was the most impressive attribute. I had zero issues with all three swappable D-pads. My preferred D-pad is the one that has the cross and circular shape built into it. If I needed to point out a quibble, I would say that that the cross D-pad creates these gaps that, if not careful, small debris can get stuck, making the controller a pain in the ass to clean. I'm talking about the folks that like eating and forget to clean their hands when grabbing the controller. Yes, you're not invited to the LAN party. The back buttons are identical to the G7 SEs. They are membrane and don't take much effort to press. Fortunately, this time around, they kept the back button latches, unlike the HE controller. You're not getting an upgrade with these back buttons, but at least they kept what worked. To map any of the extra buttons, you can use the software or follow the instructions in the manual. Simply press and hold the M button and extra button you are trying to map. The Xbox indicator will start flashing, letting you know to press the button you want to pair. And once you do so, the Xbox indicator will return to a stable light, indicating that the extra button is mapped. The start, select, home, capture, and M button are all also membrane. As far as durability, I have had no issues with these buttons in the past 3 months of use. Moving on to the joysticks. The thumbsticks are using a technology called TMR, stands for Tunnel Magnetoresistance Technology. Now, I'm not going to get into the exact science here, but I'll give you some information. To put this in simple terms, TMR is using a magnetic field similar to Hall effect sticks, but operating differently to detect even smaller inputs. Just like Hall effect tech, we are dealing with quantum physics here. The way Hall effect reads the magnetic field is perpendicular to the sensor compared to TMR reading the magnetic field in parallel to the sensor. This is the difference that makes magnetoresistance more precise, letting it offer a higher sample resolution than traditional potentiometer and Hall effect sticks. Now make sure to do your own research for this topic because I am nowhere near qualified as someone that studied quantum mechanics, but I wanted to show a snippet of my understanding of TMR sticks. The data says that magnetoresistance tech is way more precise than Hall effect technology. Now that might be true for computers, but can I tell the difference? Can a human that has been gaming on Hall effect sticks competitively for over 2 years now differentiate TMR from Hall effect sticks? The answer is no. Just to put this in perspective, I've been using Hall effect sticks with RAW mode on and a report rate of 1000 Hz for over 2 years. When I transitioned to TMR sticks, I copied the exact same settings, RAW mode on and 1000 Hz report rate. I can't tell the difference between Hall effect and TMR sticks. And I think the reason behind that is because of human limitation. A machine can tell the intricate dissimilarities, but I can't. The TMR sticks feel just as good as Hall effect sticks. I think we've hit a plateau with this type of technology. Now, I can confidently say that TMR is more energy efficient because of controllers I've used in the past compared to the G7 Pro's battery life. But as far as the thumbsticks being more precise than Hall effect, that's a big bewildered Jackie Chan for me. The joysticks are convex, meaning they're curving outward. Just like its predecessors, the G7 Pro has anti-friction glide rings, which will help with diminishing the chances of you getting stick drift. If you ever have an issue with your sticks or any button for that matter, you can calibrate your G7 Pro to find the exact problem. If it continues to persist, you can try to reset the controller. They offer a polling rate of 250 Hz, 500, and 1000 Hz for both wired and wireless. I recommend you play on the highest polling rate possible, that way you have less input lag. The biggest surprise was how efficient the controller is wirelessly. Tested the polling rate multiple times and it had 0 outliers, which means that the G7 Pro wirelessly performs just as well as it does wired. Vastly impressed on how wireless technology has gotten better over the years. It used to always be that wireless controllers had the worst input lag, but as of recently, that's not the case. The GameSir software is the GameSir Nexus. You can download the software from the Microsoft Store or from the GameSir website. They offer a decent amount of languages. Once the controller is connected to the software, make sure to update the firmware. The vibration, triggers, sticks, gyro, polling rate, remapping buttons, and dock station settings are all available in the software. You can have up to 4 profiles that will save your unique settings. Once those are saved, you can use the preset configuration switching instructions to seamlessly switch between profiles. That way you don't have to open the software when you are gaming. The same can be done with hair triggers or remapping the extra buttons. You don't necessarily need the software to do these things in a moment's notice. However, you do need to open the software for glyph swapping or customizing any other button. The customization here is extensive. Almost every button on the controller is reconfigurable with the exception of the M, mute, and pairing button. You can configure other buttons to the mute button, but you can't do the vice versa since the button is not available in the software. The D-pad can be swapped with the left stick, and it has a diagonal lock for more precise inputs. The G7 Pro faceplate comes off in 3 pieces, allowing you to customize it. What's also cool is if you switch the D-pad to the cross-shaped one, you can use the G7 SE's faceplates on this controller. Now, you might be wondering if you can do the reverse, and that is not the case. You cannot use the G7 Pro's faceplate on a G7 SE controller because of the extra magnets that the G7 Pro faceplate has. The cable is a quality threaded 3 meter or 9.84 feet USB-A to USB-C. It's the same cable you get with the G7 SE, so not really an upgrade, but not a downgrade either. There are 4 vibration motors that are fully customizable via the GameSir Nexus, 2 normal rumble motors in the grips, and 2 small ones installed in the triggers. I decided to uninstall my grip rumble motors and kept the 2 small ones since I figured it would be excessively tedious to uninstall. The rubber textured grips are a bonus for the roller, makes the G7 Pro feel like a pro controller. Definitely a plus from the G7 SE and the HE versions. The G7 Pro weighs at about 0.60 pounds or 0.27 kilos. If you uninstall the grip vibration motors, the controller weighs at 0.48 pounds or 0.22 kilograms. The G7 Pro feels very similar to the G7 SE. Ergonomically, it is comfortable, fits just fine in my hands. The grips are amazing. If for whatever reason you have sweaty hands, this will help with that. One thing that I do want to mention is if you have never played with a controller that has extra buttons next to the bumpers, they might feel weird at first depending on how you hold your controller. Other than that, I think the controller is nice, cozy, and it feels like you're holding a premium controller. Aesthetically, the controller looks gorgeous. I love the glossy finish on the ABXY buttons. The see-through on the triggers and the mini bumpers are cool. I think overall, they did a great job with the silver, white, and clear combinations on the G7 Pro. To reiterate, being able to use your previous G7 faceplates on this controller is a huge W. So final verdicts: for the price of $79.99 USD, I think the G7 Pro is worth the money. I believe you are receiving a premium product. Customization is there. Aesthetically, it's a sightly accoutrement, and the features are that of a pro controller. You're getting TMR sticks that feel vastly similar to Hall effect sticks. The data says they are more accurate, so if you want to be safe and switch for this new technology, you can for a reasonable price. The D-pad, ABXY buttons, trigger stops, and the mini bumpers were all my favorite part of testing this controller because they were so satisfying to press. It was surprising to see the controller's wireless polling rate perform as consistent as a wired connection. In my G7 SE review, I mentioned how it would be great if we got a premium version with mechanical switches on all of its features for a price of around $80 to $120. And even though we got some versions of that product with the G7 Pro, I feel like it did fall short since they still used membrane buttons. However, this controller is worthwhile, and I'm looking forward to seeing the next iteration of the GameSir G7 Pro. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.